You're about to watch James O'Brien completely dismantle the BBC and Trump. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll get straight into it.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal.
And what are you going to do about it, Donny?
Together we are determined to defend and preserve government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Our brightest days are before us. Our greatest achievements still wait. I think one of our great achievements will be election security, because nobody until I came along had any idea how corrupt our elections were. And again, most people would stand there at 9 o'clock in the evening and say, I want to thank you very much. And they go off to some other life. But I said, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Don't take my word for it. Talk to the people who were, of course, convicted of insurrection in the aftermath, in the immediate aftermath of that speech, during which, of course, during the insurrection, Donald Trump failed signally to intervene, even as his own former vice president, Mike Pence, was subject to what can only be described as a bloodlust. There's still some decent journalists out there covering this kind of issue, and one of the organisations I'd point you to has looked at, count them, 210 defendants from 40 states and the District of Columbia who were charged for their participation in the January the 6th insurrection, all of whom have said in evidence that they were answering Donald Trump's calls when they travelled to Washington and joined the violent attack on the Capitol. So had it come to court, which it would have done had he not won the subsequent election, the 2024 election, the clips you heard involved him lying about the previous election, lying egregiously, shamelessly, lying through his teeth, lying obviously, lying violently, lying in ways that almost redefine the parameters of lying. Conduct so scandalous that it is almost as bad as splicing together two bits of a speech to make him sound even more belligerent than he did already. I clutch my pearls and shiver my timbers. I'll tell you how that happened shortly as well. But 210 defendants considered Trump their leader and believed they were following his lead by joining the insurrection. And the reason why I began with that clip this morning is to remind you why they believed that they were following Trump's lead and indeed joining an insurrection that he inspired and wanted, and for which he would have been required to answer in court had he not won the 2024 election. He was impeached for it, but you need a 2/3 majority in the Senate for an impeachment to pass, and they didn't secure, although they secured a majority, they didn't secure a 2/3 majority. And then it's probably worth listening to the last bit, isn't it? Because it is with the fight like hell bit that this bit next was spliced together in an edit room for reasons that I think you have to be supremely dishonest to pretend not to understand. Was it a stupid thing to do? Yes. Was it done as part of a bias or through malevolence? Well, that's a position you can only sustain if you completely ignore what I just played you. And indeed, the entire speech in both tone and content is entirely at odds with this little snippet that follows. But what you do if you are preparing to, already signed up to the lies that Donald Trump thrives upon and depends upon for political success and political survival, is you completely ignore that. You either don't listen to the speech at all and pray that the people you're talking to or the people you're writing for don't listen to it either, or don't go back to it either, or you claim that the obvious incitement to insurrection was somehow tempered or leavened by this little phrase here, this little minute of clip here, which is completely at odds with the entirety of the rest of the speech. This, by the way, is balanced journalism, going back to the source, not inviting onto the programme somebody who is so far up Trump's bum that you can only see his toes, or somebody who was in line to be made Director General of the BBC by Boris Johnson, who of course was Prime Minister when the current Director General, the recently departed Director General, Tim Davie, was appointed. And indeed, of course, in Boris Johnson's Downing Street, Dominic Cummings held great sway, a man previously employed by a secretly funded think tank to chiefly dedicate all of his energies to calling for the BBC to be defunded. And of course, over at the BBC, as a non-executive director, you have a man called Sir Robbie Gibb, knighted for services to the Conservative Party by Theresa May, and gliding effortlessly from GBB's, a massively loss-making operation designed to let billionaires set the news agenda in this country, more of which later, over to the BBC, where he immediately started lecturing proper journalists on what impartiality looks like, and is known to have intervened in editorial appointments. You want to talk about bias? I'm here for you. You want to talk about insurrection? You need to go back to the facts. And one of the facts is that they didn't need to splice this together. You didn't need to do any mischievous editing in order to make it clear that Donald Trump was inciting an insurrection, because he was, and he did. And if you don't believe the evidence of your own eyes and ears, ask the people that did the insurrection, most of whom, of course, have been pardoned now. Funny that, isn't it? If it had nothing to do with him, why on earth would he be pardoning the people that did it? Anyway, here's the bit that they spliced together, and I'll tell you why. Because sitting in that room, in that edit, in mid to late October of last year, even then, before Donald Trump won the next election, even then, it wouldn't have occurred to anybody in that building that the narrative was going to shift so violently and so far. I don't know if we should put this little splice together, because some people might be claiming this time next year that he didn't actually incite the insurrection. To which the only reasonable response would have been, don't be so stupid. Nobody's ever going to claim that black is white, that up is down, that freedom is slavery, that ignorance is strength. Nobody's ever going to claim any of these. Look, it's a silly edit, but it's an edit made in the context of not contemplating for a moment that British journalists, never mind Donald Trump fanboys and girls, would be queuing up to pretend that his lies were truth, that the election was stolen, that the insurrection was not incited by him, that the, count them, 210 people tracked down by one media organisation or examined by one media organisation, well, an ethics organisation in the United States, didn't express their absolute certainty that they were acting on his say-so. So in that edit at that moment, it wouldn't have crossed anybody's mind that they'd have to defend themselves against accusations of undermining the idea that he incited an insurrection, because he so obviously did. So why do it is the only question left to answer, and that's a question they should be required to answer. It's not a question that involves resignations or, let's be honest, sackings. And I'll tell you why the sackings happened after I play you the clip, what got spliced.
And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity of our elections, but whether or not they stand strong for our country. Our country. Our country has been under siege for a long time, far longer than this 4-year period.
And of course, the reason you play the clips is because the rest is interpretation. So you play the clips. You can't listen to that speech without concluding that he incited an insurrection. I mean, it is literally impossible to do so. But we live in a world where the literally impossible has become electorally successful, not least, of course, in the context of the White House. It was a stupid thing to do, but they didn't need to do it. The speech would have delivered all of the evidence that was needed to prove incitement to insurrection, as the Senate concluded, a majority of the Senate concluded, and as the court almost certainly would have done if he hadn't had all charges dropped as a consequence of winning the last election. So I don't know who lines up on the other side, really. I should probably have a look at my inbox. I don't know who lines up on the other side, claiming that he didn't incite an insurrection. So you're calling the 210 people who joined it liars. They say, why did you join it? And they say, because Donald Trump wanted us to. He told us to. Well, what are they, liars? They did it independently. They decided to act upon the ludicrous and deeply dishonest claim that the election had been stolen without any reference to the person making that claim. The lie itself is an incitement to insurrection. You believe in democracy and somebody tells you it has been traduced, then you are being incited if that person is lying. If that person is telling the truth, you're being inspired. Isn't that weird? I hadn't thought of that before. If I tell you something that's not true, for example, about the identity of somebody who's undertaken a terrible crime, and you then go and set fire to buildings containing people who may share some attributes with someone who's committed a terrible crime, I am inciting you. But of course, even if I'm telling the truth about the identity of the culprit, I'm also inciting you if you take from my words the belief that you should go out and burn buildings down or set fire to buildings. If I lie to you about an election being stolen, I am inciting you. If I tell you the truth about an election being stolen, I'm actually inspiring you. Now, if it was in Russia, for example, and you were casting a sceptical eye over the election results, then you would have a case for inspiring popular revolution, popular revolt. But literally nobody honest, informed, or remotely interested in evidence believes that Donald Trump won the election he claims that he won against Joe Biden. It is the mother of all lies. It's the lie upon which everything else rests and all else follows, which is why he has to continue working to inflate it and to and endorse it. So we're now contemplating the semantic possibility of fighting peacefully, which of course is just enough camouflage for people to pretend that they didn't hear what they heard, and that the hundreds of insurrectionists that day, including seditionists, of course, like the Proud Boys and other organisations, didn't hear what you heard. And, you know, I'm still surprised by the effort people put into pretending they didn't hear what they just heard. I'm surprised when my father's old paper does it, the Daily Telegraph. More outraged, apparently, by a stupid splice in the edit suite than by the leader of the free world existing or achieving power with lies, with unparalleled, unprecedented lies, with disgusting and hideous lies. It makes the stuff about eating dogs and cats look positively tame. But his entire political project is based on lies. You know, and he can't help himself. You'd have thought, having been re-elected, he might have come let's never mention that business again when I pretended that I'd won. But he can't help himself. That's the narcissism coming up against the pathology. But I don't know how much effort it takes. How much effort does it take to pretend that a 1-hour speech inciting violence is somehow defused or undermined by a 1-minute clip where he talks about the country being under siege. He talks about standing strong for our country. He talks about the elections having been stolen. He talks about making your voices heard. And he uses the word peacefully once, having used the word fight twice in a single sentence. We will never concede. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So it's not even up for debate. And that's the problem. The BBC would now debate it. Now it would. Last year it wouldn't have done, which is how they ended up making the stupid edit. Last year it wasn't debatable. Of course he incited an insurrection. Nobody pretends otherwise. Of course he lied about winning in 2020. Nobody pretends otherwise except him and his mad supporters. But that's the way it works. That's the way these things unfold, is that you tell a lie often enough and loud enough, and eventually the pendulum starts swinging. And either people who know it's a lie stop caring enough, or people who don't really know for sure that it's a lie start believing that it isn't. And we're witnessing it now being bizarrely sponsored and promoted by UK media outlets that seem to be celebrating the interference in British democracy of a foreign leader. I would not be surprised if the BBC seat in the press room goes to GBB's in the next week or two. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm exaggerating. We'll check in with Simon Marks later to see what he thinks about it all. But I would not be surprised if they use this as a pretext to keep the BBC out of the briefing, just as they're keeping all half-decent American journalists out of the press briefings and confining the congregation entirely to people who are fully paid-up members of this ludicrous fan club. A fan club that only exists to lie about the insurrection and to lie about the 2020 election result. Isn't that extraordinary? It was genuinely extraordinary. 19 minutes after 10 is the time. I've got a lot more to tell you. I want to tell you a little bit more about the very deliberate, concerted attempts over decades to destroy the BBC, to render it, because it does not exist, to do the bidding of the billionaire that owns it, like GB News does, like The Spectator does, like the Daily Mail does. It does not exist to do the bidding of the millionaire that owns it, like the Times does these days, most of the time, like the Sun does. It does not exist to do the bidding of the billionaire that owns it. And if you don't understand the peril of that simple sentence, have a look at who was sitting behind Donald Trump at the inauguration. Spoiler alert, the billionaires who control public discourse in the United States of America, whether by buying newspapers or owning social media platforms. And, of course, in Elon Musk's case, turning it into a racist, far-right, Trump-supporting sewer. So you could sit here on a morning like this and think, why are they so exercised by the BBC? Why do they care so much? Why are they turning this relative molehill into an enormous mountain? And the answer is they can't. They can't help themselves. Anybody not doing the bidding of that cabal, or whatever you want to call it, that in this case Trump-supporting corruptocracy, anybody in a position to stand up to it, to challenge it, to shine a little bit of light into it. Here's my next guest, Nigel Farage. What? On what possible planet is he a valid contributor to a conversation about this? He's on the BBC more than David Dimbleby was in his Question Time days. And what the BBC don't realise is that these people want their destruction. And they think that by feeding them or tickling them or appeasing them, they'll somehow be able to see off the threat. But it's an existential threat, because they hate any media outlet that doesn't doff cap, tug forelock and do what they want. It's extraordinary when you see it in such simple and clear terms. It's absolutely extraordinary. What's your problem with the BBC? Most people think it leans the wrong way. Most people on the left think it's horribly biased towards the right. Yeah, but it does actually report stuff that the right wing doesn't want to be reported. Robbie Gibb, pro-Brexit, went to work for Theresa May. Imagine the left-wing equivalent of that. Imagine somebody who was on the record as being opposed to Brexit, was allowed to continue in that kind of role at the BBC. Andrew Neil, of course, was publishing The Spectator, soon to be a Daily Mail columnist, but he could do impartiality, he could do a lack of bias. It's quite bizarre.
This monologue is one of James O'Brien's most scathing demolitions around kind of the revisionist narrative around January the 6th. And he also exposes how British media institutions are basically being captured by the same forces that enabled Trump's return to power. And the opening Trump clips are devastating in their clarity. Like, he says, we'll never concede. You have to fight like hell. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And this isn't dog whistle politics. It's an air raid siren incitement. Yet somehow the entire discourse has shifted to debating whether one use of the word peacefully in an hour-long speech somehow negates the other 59 minutes of violent rhetoric. And the 210 defendants citing Trump as their inspiration isn't interpretation or bias. It's courtroom testimony from the people who actually committed the insurrection. And, you know, when the participants themselves are saying, we did this because Trump told us to, claiming that Trump didn't incite anything requires calling those 210 people liars while simultaneously pardoning them for their crimes that they apparently committed independently. And it's just a bit of a mind, I can't swear on this, but yeah, you know what I'm about to say, because it doesn't really make sense as to how those people can be liars, because what else inspired them, right? And yeah, I think it's just, you can see O'Brien's frustration with the BBC appeasement strategy, because they think that, in terms of UK politics, they think that if they platform Farage enough, and give him more airtime, then maybe the right wing attack dogs will be satisfied. But they won't, because the goal isn't balance. It's basically destruction. And I think the whole monologue just perfectly captures something essential about the moment we're in. We're watching real-time revision of events that happened on camera. And when you can't prove something with footage and it's still denied, then we're in a very, very dangerous place. But I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.